Hello, I'm Scott Thompson, and welcome to this brand new version of After 10. Starting this week, we'll be with you every weeknight at this time, providing in-depth analysis of the major issues affecting the Korean Peninsula. Tonight, we are joined by Yigal Erlich, founder and chairman of the Yozma Group, which has been the driving force behind the creative economy in Israel. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Let's begin with why you're here. What brings you to Korea?
Well, you know, the Korean government decided about a new policy of creative economy, and they think that Israel can be a kind of a place that did it in the past, and still it is a creative economy. And I was asked to come here to see if we can do some cooperation together.
And as you mentioned, Israel is often mentioned as a role model when the Park Geun-hye administration talks about building up a creative economy. When you hear things like that, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, it brings me back to where we were about 20 years ago, when we decided to start, the government decided to start the venture capital industry. We were more or less in the same situation where we thought that innovation and creativity and new companies, new entrepreneurs is very important for the country. And then the government decided to take an action and establish the venture capital industry, which enable or facilitate the emergence of new entrepreneurs and new companies.
Let's take a step back to the beginning of the Ozma Group. For those who may not be familiar with what it does and what it is, could you give us a brief introduction?
Well, first, you know, Yozma was a government company. The mission was to establish the venture capital market in Israel. We did it with $100 million government money, which was aimed to establish funds together with experienced people, mainly from abroad. So we picked up several funds, venture capital funds from the US and from Europe, convinced them to come to Israel and work together with local partners and with us in order to establish new funds. In this way, we did about 10 funds, which afterwards was the backbone of the industry, of the venture capital in Israel. These funds were very successful. The government got return, positive return, you know, on its investment, and also achieved the goal to establish venture capital. After the first round that we did, the government was not involved anymore in direct investment in funds or in companies.
And the word Yozma means, if I'm not mistaken, initiative in Hebrew. Where did the name come from exactly?
Initiative? Well, you know, we started something new. So we're saying, you know, to initiate new things, it's always fascinating and, you know, very challenging.
How exactly then does venture capital give this support to the venture businesses that are hoping to build up?
Well, we are talking, you know, about small companies. Small companies, mostly new entrepreneurs that don't have enough experience about how to develop business. They have good ideas about what to develop. Not always they know how, and not always they know what is the market, and they need help. It's not only money. They need some well-formed, experienced people. This is what venture capital give them. I mean, that the fact that they come with money and with the ability to help, what we call they can add value to the money they invest, it's for them a kind of a win-win situation. So for the entrepreneurs, they get the experience from people who did it before. They get the network of these people that can introduce them to the world, to other investors, to other investment banks, to other companies. And for the investors, you know, there are new ideas, new ways to make money.
And in terms of the economy as a whole, what role, what significance do these startup companies have for the economy as a whole?
Oh, a big influence, a big impact, at least in the Israeli case. You know, when we started with Yozma, with 10 funds, we created immediately a market for investments, you know, of about $200 million with 10 funds. But after the success of the fund, it started to continue like a snowball, because more funds saw the success and decided to come to Israel. The funds that we invested raised more money. So in 10 years, all the funds that came to Israel at that time raised about $15 billion, which were invested into local companies. Also, you know, very soon after, a kind of merger and acquisition phenomenon started, which means that many international companies started to look to the Israeli companies, small companies with good technologies, and came in to acquire them. And there were many acquisitions by American and European companies, also, by the way, was some Korean companies as well recently. And these companies that bought the local small companies continue to keep the people and even expand the activity. So you see the infrastructure of venture capital brought in not only money, investment, and also expertise, but also attracted other venture funds to invest and attracted international companies to come and locate themselves in Israel for their R&D developments and expanding also their activity in Israel.
And the Ozma Group started with a value of about $250 million US. It has since grown over the past 20 years or so to about $4 billion in value. That is significant growth, of course. What has been the secret to the success?
Well, as I said, you know, one major reason for the success was the fact that we engage with international player expertise companies, venture capital companies that were ready to come to Israel and be in the management of the funds, of the new funds. This was a very great help because they didn't only come with their expertise, but also with their network. So this is one thing. The other one, we started to see success stories. And you know, when people see success, they're attracted to it. So they started to realize, all kinds of investors, including institutional investors, started to realize that maybe you can make money in Israel. I mean, even if it is risky business, still you can make a very nice return, which is more than the normal market. So we started to see many of them coming and investing in Israel. That's why it was increased very fast. So the fact that we had international players and expertise, and the fact we were lucky to have success stories, good success stories, bring all the rest.
Hutzpah, and forgive my pronunciation if it's not quite accurate, but chutzpah is a word you often hear associated with startups in Israel. Explain for us what the word means and why it's often linked up to startups in Israel.
Well, Scott, chutzpah you said correctly, but you know, chutzpah has many meanings. Referring to what we are talking here, let's take the positive side of chutzpah because it has some negatives as well, you know. But the positive side is that you are doing what you think is the right to do, and you are not afraid to say it. You are not afraid to discuss about it. You are not afraid to open doors for it. As far as you think that you are doing the right thing and you want to achieve the target you put for yourself. Some people call it a chutzpah because you are not listening to others, or you say what you think, even maybe most of the people say you are not right. But if you believe that you are right, it's better to stick with your way. Either you succeed or fail, but otherwise, it's you for sure you will fail.
Israel has about 4,500 venture businesses, quite a large number, really, when you consider that the population is about 8 million. What has been the driving force in propelling Israel to become a leader in this creative economy type of atmosphere?
Well, we are well known to be a very entrepreneurial country. I mean, people are very entrepreneurial. We have many entrepreneurs. It means that people who finish sometimes the university and start to work in big companies after a few years have idea and are ready to leave and start their own career. It means that people who finish the army in special units where they get a lot of experience in developing new technologies, new edge technologies, decide after finishing this service to start their own companies. So you see a lot of initiatives in Israel compared to other places per population. And the fact that they can get resources of funding and some other help, as I said before, from venture funds, create also successes. So once you are an entrepreneur and you have a success, you want to start again, and you start again. And once you have second-time entrepreneurs, the rate of success is growing. So today we say that most of the companies that having second-time entrepreneurs or third-time entrepreneurs, the rate of success is very high. So during the time, it's a kind of evolution, We started in a point when nobody thought that we can make money. You can make money in Israel from technology. We achieved the day that everybody thinks that in Israel it's like a place where you can make money out of investment in technology and where you can find the best technology, modern, up-to-date technologies.
Korea and Israel have achieved economic success in different ways. What is the best model for Korea's creative economy that combines Israel's creative abilities and Korea's development potential?
When you look at Korea today, what strengths, what potential do you see in this push for a creative economy?
Well, there are some fields, that I think that if Korea can focus or can be more investing in these fields, maybe for the future, it makes sense. As we say also in Israel, we are always looking for what will be the next ideas to invest in. Today, the king is internet and media. I'm not sure how long it will take, but the more basic technologies like medical technologies, alternative energies, things like that, will come back and will need huge investment because they are the future. And there is a need to invest much more money than it is today. The internet and all the media and the applications is something that attract not only young people to try their luck, but also investors because it's not too much money for investment, short time to see if you can do it or not, and then sometimes you can make a lot of money. But these are the basics that can hold, for a long time. And I believe that new areas like medical fields and like energy should be more in focus.
Going back in time just a little bit, I know the fund was established in part to address an employment problem in Israel. Can you explain the situation there at that time, how bad things were and what the plan was for pulling the population back up?
Well, the question of employment, it's complicated a little bit, but we talk about employment of young people because what we have to take care is not to have a negative immigration. People leaving the country because they don't have job, they finish the university, and sometimes they learn biology, they learn physics, and they don't have where to work. So for them, the answer is technology companies. So you have to create a basis for technology companies, and you have to build, as we said, the ecosystem. And we started to build it, through the chief scientist's office in Israel, that they started to help companies with funding the projects. And then we started the venture capital funds. Tax issues were solved for investors and for companies. So we built an ecosystem that more companies started. And once you have more companies, you have more jobs. Because if a company succeeds, it can start, with 3, 4, 5, 10 people. And then it can increase very fast even to tens or hundreds of people. Then if the company is acquired by another company, like it happened in Israel in many cases, by Google, by Microsoft, by Apple recently, by IBM, many companies, then they expand more. So they take the nucleus of this company and employ more people. So you see that the basis of the venture capital that started in Israel used as an infrastructure for employment of young people especially.
And as you know, youth unemployment is an issue in this country. Older people as well are having a harder time finding jobs. It's an economic issue, but it's also becoming a social issue as time goes on. What might be some ways to tackle the problem from your experiences?
Well, I think the government should try and encourage more people to start more companies. Of course, if you engage with global funds, it can help you much more. Don't forget that on each employee of high-tech companies, there are 2 or 3 others that are outsourcing it, Either it's with the transportation, food, whatever, media. There are always more employment on the basis of these companies. So I think that if you can increase the number of companies that start every year, you can solve, for young generation at least, you can solve part of the problem.
The Park Geun-hye administration has been really putting a lot of effort into creating jobs through improving the global competitiveness of these information and communications technology companies. What might be a good example of an ICT enterprise that Korea could learn from in its push to develop more of these?
Well, ICT in Israel is, I would say, is very diversified. If you look at what happened, let's say, even during the last 10 years, the evolution of such industries is they start, then they grow to a point that they are acquired. Very few can become big companies. For instance, we have a company called Checkpoint that started about 20 years ago, less than 20 years ago. Their success is due first, of course, due to the entrepreneur. Started also almost from nothing. And due to the fact that the niche that they were in, like security of computers, started to grow. So they were more or less the first. So once you are in the first one, in a market that starts to grow, you're lucky to be a big company. So this company today, it's a company, I think, traded at about a few billions of dollars in Nasdaq stock exchange. So you can see not too many examples like that, because many of the companies, don't have enough air, to continue, and then they are acquired by big companies from all over the world.
And I know you are helping the Park Geun-hye administration, the government here, promote this creative economy to help these venture companies. How is that going, that campaign going so far, and what exactly do you foresee that relationship becoming over time?
Well, I don't know if you can call it a campaign. I mean, from our side, I came here a few times and I met ministers, I met companies, and I tried to convince them, or first to tell them what we did, and to convince them that they should take, action steps, not just talking about the needs, but try to do something that they will see the results in 1, 2, 3 years, not later. Now it's very difficult here to get to know where you're going, because people take their time, have to think. Maybe they are afraid to take drastic steps, and they have to be sure that any idea they check is the right idea. But sometimes you have, especially if it's time, maybe like that now, and especially if there is a president that wants you to go in a specific direction, there is a time to take faster decision and try to take more risk, even if you are government.
And the Ozma Group recently opened up its first Korean branch in Seoul. What kind of work is being promoted there?
Well, we have we open our office. We have Won-jae Lee, who is the head of this office. He is experienced he was in Israel several years, so he has a very good local network and a network in Israel as well. And I hope he can find the right ideas how to combine between companies here and Israel.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to meet with us and providing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, as always, for watching. A quick reminder that we'll be on every weeknight from here on out, providing in-depth analysis of the issues affecting the Korean Peninsula. See you next time.